Okay, it's my huge head and frame. It's what my wife would make fun of me for.
It's all right.
All right. Okay. Hey everybody, this is Evan Paul with Notorious Scoundrels, Fifth Trooper, lots of other titles, whatever.
Can you tell it's day 3 of a con?
Yeah, you know, I've been playing Legion a while, and so my mind is starting to go. But to help me get my head straight here is a gentleman you might. Oh, okay. So to make me descend further into mental chaos that we have Will Shick. Welcome.
Hey guys.
Thank you for coming by this corner of the Baird Center that I found where there weren't all that many people talking and making noise.
This is a nice, calm section of the whole thing. I'm surprised you found one. It's
very busy it took a while. It took a while. Luckily, I lost my second round early enough that I had a little bit of extra time to scout out.
Right.
But Will, I appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah. So it was a big day. Was it yesterday? 2 days ago? I can't even remember. Oh my God!
It's been a big 3 days, but yesterday I think was the big keynote.
Yeah, you can tell. You can tell that we've been here a while, but very exciting stuff that you talked about for all 3 games.
Yeah.
I'll very quickly say about MCP that as a Brotherhood fanboy, is that I'm excited about all the new friends that they're going to get.
Yeah. They definitely add out. So I'm excited to see how they fit into your rosters.
The only thing I'm worried about is that between Exodus and Magneto is that we're just going to run out of terrain.
It's possible. It's possible.
Yeah, once the board empty, there's nothing else for them to do. But yeah, we're mostly going to be talking about Legion. Got a couple of quick questions about Shatterpoint too, because we do cover that as well. But we'll get right into it. Hopefully, I will not overlap with any of the stuff that David Zelenka went over in Winter Moon. I read a summary of that, so hopefully I'm giving the people what they want. But I think that I know that David did talk to you about this customizable unit thing.
Yeah.
I guess my main question. So we did hear from David that for everybody except for clones, funny enough, is that they're replacing the prior either generic officer or super tac droid, and then clones are going to hang on to their generic commander for dear life, but they're getting some new Jedi folks, so all of that's really cool. One thing I was going to ask though was that you mentioned that there was this design element to the customizability to where the actual stuff on their unit card can be different. And I was curious, like, what are you able to share about what that actually looks like on the table?
Well, so the way in which the customizable characters work is that you have your basic, your bare bones, right?
Mm-hmm.
Commander and your operative card. They have their assigned points. They have like I think 1 keyword each. That's just shared between all of them. Their universal keyword, and then they have their health, their courage, and sometimes they have a weapon.
Yeah.
Like a base weapon. And then what you do as the players, they have a whole suite of upgrades, and the doctrines are really where you're going to get the character of your characters, right? Each doctrine is different. There's a number of different doctrines that you can choose from. Doctrines are limited, so they're pipped, which means that if you take 4 customizable characters, you're not going to be able to have 4 of the same doctrine.
I see.
So there's a bit of a balancing factor in there. You can't like min max or spam the best doctrine if you assume that there's a best one. When you take that doctrine, it's going to give you several keywords or universal keywords, and then it's also going to give you potentially some other ability that's listed on the card as well, like the unique rule or things like that.
Okay.
That might not be covered by a keyword. That varies based on doctrine.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, you have several other options that you might be able to do depending on which customizable character you're doing. Like there might be unique trainings, there might be unique weapons and gear slots and things that will come with it. Of course, you can also use universal ones as well for some of those, depending on if they tie in or things like that. So what you're really able to do is to customize your own characters based on these parameters. The goal was to create a system that looked a lot like creating an RPG character, right? So you pick kind of your base, you pick your specializations, and then you pick all this other stuff. And then on the table, it works just like any other unit, where your upgrade cards are kind of telling you your additional abilities, then you have your basic command card, and it's not really anything more special than a normal character or unit in Legion, with the exception of you chose all the parts to build it out of. And you can obviously make different choices through, different list builds or things like that. And yeah, I think that does that cover.
Yeah. I mean that's really interesting, and I guess I was also curious about was that challenging to balance? Because it sounds like there's a lot of moving parts.
There were a significant amount of internal and playtesting like workload, because obviously it's not really exciting if we're like it's customizable and there's like two options.
Yeah, that's not very customizable.
That's true, but is it really? And we wanted these to be really significant. We wanted players to have a lot of opportunities and fun making themselves or making their own Star Wars characters for Legion, having the chance to maybe take things that are existing in these options, these doctrines and stuff, and not necessarily completely overwrite inherent weaknesses or deficiencies within their faction, but be able to kind of like smooth over some of it with options by creating options that may not exist in the current selection of like commanders and operatives for them. And so that was a huge ask, and we started, with all four of them and all these different ideas. And so it was like we started effectively in the development cycle. We said, okay, what are some archetypes that we really want to see out of each of the different factions and the different commanders? And then we said, what do those archetypes mean? How do we distill those down into Legion? Some of that was drawing from existing characters and saying, well, X, Y, or Z does this well, so we know these keywords or this kind of like functionality should be brought into this. And then how do we make sure that you can't just de facto replace that character with this character?
Yeah.
So we changed some things around. Some of it was, merging new ideas or new kind of like keywords together to create specific things, and taking inspiration from stuff that we wanted to replicate. I bring up like the Zabrak with the big heavy rotary blaster that had everyone wondering who he was and all that stuff. Like his design influence was really brought from like Baze Malbus and Paz Vizsla, right?
Yeah, he looks like sort of a fusion of those two. Yeah,
it was very much like okay, we've seen these archetypes before in media. How do we take that idea and make it into this customizable Legion character, like build options? Some of it was designed and pushed forward by what the engineering and sculpting teams gave us, because Dallas and his team concepted a whole bunch of options, because we needed to know that all the parts would work, right? So a lot of the miniatures design process was done before even the development took over. And then what happened was they were like, here are all the parts we have, here's how the builds kind of look. And then we also took that and kind of worked it into the design process as well. So it was a significant process. Even though it took a lot of playtesting to kind of rein in and get right and find that sweet spot.
Yeah.
The overall, it was one of the most fun playtest cycles that I think we ever had, or a couple cycles. Like the testers overall, they were over the moon at the idea of getting to make these characters and talking about how they were able to like interact and do these different things. So it was really fun.
Yeah.
And really proved that we were on to something. We felt like that was filling a void that Legion hadn't had in a long time. But that a lot of other war games, like I've mentioned, do kind of have at their baseline, which is that build your own captain, build your own general kind of thing. And so it's really fun to be able to bring that to Legion. And then, of course, we had to talk our partners at LFL through it and explain how the things worked. And they were very receptive right out of the gate. They gave us a couple of guidelines to follow, but overall, they let spider legs through. They let through a lot of other things that they were like,
I saw those spider legs,
choice.
And when I saw those spider legs, I was like, wow, LFL really let them do that, huh?
They did. They were like, you know what? Dallas made an impassioned little like statement about it, and he was like, these are special characters, and they're one of a kind. So clearly, like somebody out there would have this, and we've seen this type of like machinery before in Star Wars. And they're like, you know what? That we agree. And they were like, just don't put it on the front of the box. And we were like, that's fine.
I like that they make a distinction between front of the box and inside the box material.
Oh yeah, 100%. Right?
That's
Because
amazing.
the game, in the end, right? They understand and they're fully on board with the idea that the game is player choice. That players are going to choose how they express themselves through Star Wars and through the galaxy. No different than you did with Kenner toys as a child or things like that. So they're all on board with that. But there's always that, okay, but it's also the official product. It's going to be on the shelf. It has to represent Star Wars in a good way.
Yeah.
And sometimes so they'll be like, you can get away with that, but you have to do this, and it's totally cool. It's a great part of the relationship.
I get it. It makes sense. Just a couple hours ago, I bore personal witness to Darth Vader getting killed by a Fluttercraft, which I'm not sure if LFL would have signed off on that.
True.
Don't put it on the front of the box, right?
But does not sound like a canonical story. For sure.
Probably not. So I wanted to move on to talking a little bit about the Hondo Weequay speeder tank sort of stuff that we showed. I have a quick question first. Is that when the article was posted on Atomic Mass, there was mention of Hondo being a part of the promotion with Hobby Next, and so I was wondering if you could tell us what that is, because I looked at it for a while and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to ask Will.
Yeah. So Hobby Next, if folks might remember, Hobby Next is a retailer program that Asmodee offers to the stores that qualify or apply for it. Hobby Next does really cool cross promotions. They work with studios to get like promotional materials or things, items, and then they offer those through the Asmodee distribution units based on criteria that they set. And they're just kind of a way to incentivize and build sales in stores.
Right? Okay.
So we did work with Hobby Next with Shatterpoint, and we had the early release of Ahsoka Tano, Padawan Ahsoka Tano.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
And so Hondo is in a similar boat, right? So what we did is we said, okay, we would love to part. Like they came and they were like, we know Legion's going to be a big thing. Hobby Next wants to be a part of it. We'd like to do this program. What can you give us, or what would you recommend that we do? And so we talked about it internally. We're like, Hondo would be like the one that everyone would want. Right? He not only does he work for
everybody, yeah.
He works for everyone, but he's an iconic character. Legion players have been waiting for him forever, so like it seems like a great fit. And so what'll happen is that stores that qualify through that program, and that program is run through Asmodee, not necessarily us. So we help provide information and stuff, but the final details will be revealed later when they determine on how the program will work, how stores will get it. So if you are a local game store, or you want to talk to your local game store about getting it, just have them contact their Asmodee reps and say, hey, what's this Legion Hobby Next program? And they'll be able to make sure that they get linked up with it, and they'll be able to do it. But effectively what will happen through the program is that a certain number of early release Hondos, just Hondo, not the whole Weequay unit,
right,
will be made available in special packaging. They'll go out to stores alongside the starters based on whatever criteria the program sets for itself. And then stores will be able to distribute those among their player base as they see fit or as the program dictates.
Yeah.
And so it's just a nice way to like celebrate the launch, give a little bit of extra oomph to stores and local game stores especially, which I love. And that's what I love most about the Hobby Next program. Is
yeah, absolutely.
Really supporting brick and mortar. And then from there, in Q2, that Weequay pirate unit will come out. You'll be able to get your Honda there if you didn't get it before that. So nobody's going to miss out on anything, right? We're all going to have the opportunity to have them. It's just some folks may get a little early access to them as part of the celebration.
Yeah, and so will he be legal for competitive play when the Hobby Next program starts up?
Yep.
Okay.
We count that as like the first release, so he will be available for players who have him to be able to put into competitive play. My expectation, largely based on playtest and everything, is that he's a very fun character, but he is an extraordinarily swinging character. So there might be a list or two that can maximize that to their benefit, but I don't imagine that too many top tables will have a Hondo included in them.
But that's okay, right? Because if it's a merc for all the factions,
yep.
and you can set up situations to where you play that 4-pip, and then you're doing whatever the heck that guy's going to do when he I forget the name of that keyword, but like the one where depending.
My mood is based on profit.
Yeah, that's right. It's a great keyword, by the way. I'm sure that there's going to be some stuff, but even if it's just fun, is that if it's something that everybody can get easily, and that it encourages brick and mortar, is that I'm all for it having having releases that don't have to like fit on the curve, especially if they're like from a generic murky in it. It's like when they're coming out for a faction, that's when it gets a little bit more dicey, and then you get people mad at you.
It's true. It's true. And anyway, so then so it'll just be Hondo in the Hobby Next. He'll be in the Weequay unit box, and then of course you can build Hondo, or you can do the generic Weequay captain as an upgrade to that unit. That unit does work for Shadow Collective. Hondo does not. And so that'll be, if you miss the Hobby Next opportunity, that'll be the next opportunity. That's like, I think it's 5 months after Max, if I'm doing my math right. So it's pretty close. Enough time for the early release to feel special and for folks to have them, and then for everyone else to get a hold of their own Hondo and Weekways.
Why does Hondo not work for Shadow Collectors? Is their bank account isn't big enough, basically? Yeah.
No, canonically, he refused to work with Maul because he realized that Maul was too dangerous. So
he's a smart guy.
Yeah.
It's not good for business.
That's right. He's a very smart guy. So so the canonical representation was like, okay, we know story-wise he refused to work with Shadow Collective, so he got left out. But the Weekways themselves, there's a lot of Weekways. There's not just Hondo's Weekways, right? Or Weekways all across the galaxy. They're very mercenaries, so we were able to put them in. And then, of course, the WLO5 speeder tank is also coming to reinforce both Shadow Collective and as a mercenary option for several factions.
Okay. Wow. Are Rebels finally going to get their tank?
I think. Well, I mean, they'll get a mercenary tank.
Yeah, but at least they'll have a tank option.
Yeah.
They've been pretending that a bus is a tank for like 2 years now.
They have been. I don't know if the WLO will supplant that bus, but maybe.
Well, it's probably just a different thing. I assume it's not transporting people.
It's definitely not in Rebels. It's not for sure.
Yeah. Interesting.
But yeah, it was an interesting design to do because it's like I think it's really I say it's the first light tank in Legion, but the T-47 Airspeeder is also kind of a light tank. The difference with that is that it's kind of a pseudo flyer because it has a lot of rules that let it zip around the battlefield really fast. It's supposed to just not die by not getting shot.
Oh, interesting.
But the WLO5, right? It's obviously not nearly as fast as the T-47.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And so it's lightly armored, but it packs a heck of a punch. And so I think it'll be really interesting. We were pretty excited with the design and how it goes, and I'm kind of curious to see how it slots into various armies. If certain factions will find it to be really useful, like maybe Rebels, I think is probably the place where it has the most opportunity, just based on what they have option wise, and then how it affects, how the two releases affect Shadow Collective in terms of their makeup and their builds, and bringing a larger sized unit that's of slightly lower quality, but just more bodies. And the Weekways are also really built around the idea that they're pirates, so they love objectives. They have some unique rules that let them get a little boost when they're holding objectives. They have a little courage, so you kind of have to like work around some of these things. They're also very good in melee with their like swashbucklingness and stuff. So I think they hopefully will provide that kind of like tiered. You have your pikes as your general core. You have your black suns as your like close range.
Yeah, range 2. Yeah.
And then you have the Weekways, which are kind of objective holders, but also can get in there and scrum around pretty well.
So they're going to have relatively scrappy blasters, but their vibro axes will pack a decent punch. Yeah.
I mean, they're not terrible at range, right?
Yeah.
But that's not really where they excel, because largely a lot of the design that Andrew put into them was the idea that they want to press forward because they want to get objectives.
Yeah.
Due to their unique keywords, and then once they're there, they're obviously going to be very close to fight. So the idea that they could be kind of good in melee made sense from a pirate perspective, because if you think about pirates, you think about swinging from ropes and close combat and that kind of stuff.
And this is, of course, the big unit that Will Pagani was hinting at, which Mike and I obviously totally struck out in terms of like trying to guess what it was. Mike was like very adamant, it's got to be Mud Troopers. But yeah, Weequay is also something that makes sense. You wouldn't have thought it was scary, but before we had the new cover rules, it actually was scary.
Yeah, I mean, look, even when you stack 10 dice of anything, with old cover, it becomes pretty powerful.
I'd say
and there was
so.
like no way around it. So we did learn a lesson on that one, and that's why I kind of sat around for a little bit until we were able to put out the new rules and bring in the big squads and all that stuff. And now they're finally getting revealed for the first time, despite the fact that they've been done for 2 years.
2 years,
or so.
yeah.
It's been a long time.
It's exciting, and I'm super glad that Shadow Collective is getting more units.
Mhm.
I think that y'all had to keep it close to the chest. You got your thing. I understand, but I was starting to get worried because I would see the players who really liked playing that Battleforce were sort of getting worried about the fact that there wasn't going to be much else for them. And of course, there is still a brother of Maul out there as a potential future character.
There's a little Savage Press. But I mean, there's definitely places that can be gone. Like we've kind of said before, though, Shadow Collective is a Battleforce is kind of a sub faction in terms of like its overall support. So it's not going to see as much, but absolutely our goal is not to abandon it completely, right?
Yeah, of course.
When we have opportunities to bring stuff in that'll make sense for it, or to like touch back on some of the missing main character elements for it, I think it's great. The other really nice thing about it is that as we start to explore more of the corners of the Star Wars, galaxy that are not within the normal 4 factions, you get a lot more opportunity to say, well, yeah, of course, this disparate element would work here or would work there, and those kinds of things. So I think, there is a world in which those releases they're not necessarily Shadow Collective releases, but they're releases that someday conceivably people brought up like a Jabba the Hutt kind of Battleforce, right?
Yeah, Weequays would work for them too.
Weequays would work for them.
Yeah.
But conceivably, like Gamorrean Guards might also work for Shadow Collective.
Yeah.
So I think as we get more and more into that future, there are these opportunities where you're going to see some more cross stuff through these different things and that kind of thing. And so who knows what the future holds. But again, it's absolutely not something that we're abandoning or we're no longer doing anything for. It's just the release cadence on that is obviously going to be way different than, say, a normal standard faction.
It sounds kind of fun, if you're thinking of a mercenary unit, and then you get to go through the process of okay, well, who would they work for? Mm-hmm. It's not this guy, but these other ones.
It's definitely a big part of it as we kind of explore that stuff, and it also goes to do they work for these factions? Do we want them to work for any faction? Are they just specifically for these different sub-faction battle forces, that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So talking about release schedule, I was going to shift to Shatterpoint for a little bit. Is that so? Obviously, you said before that the first year of Shatterpoint was your big push year.
Yep.
So you got tons of expansions out there, and it's now covered everything from basically the start of episode 2 to all the way to the Mandalorian era. And so you've covered a lot of ground, and I think that lots of folks have found the niche that they're enjoying in the game. I for one, am glad that that Delta Force is going to be adding a little bit of Clone Commando bonuses.
Yep.
I do love playing them, and they were one of the few paint jobs that I actually felt good about once I got done with them. But I'm still fairly a novice of Shatterpoint, and it was when I noticed that the Clone Commandos didn't have any shoves on their tree. I was like, oh, this is making it kind of tough.
A little difficult, yeah.
But I was going to ask about, is the release schedule that's coming up for the next year, is that more of what we should expect as being kind of the typical Shatterpoint schedule? Or is Legion, the big Legion stuff, kind of holding things up a little bit? Or?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, right, there's a manufacturing bandwidth. Right? There's only so much plastic that we can produce, even with the factories that we work with. And so you see that ebb and flow, right? One of the reasons that we really hit Shatterpoint hard was we wanted to provide a really firm foundation, but we had that capacity, and we knew as we moved forward that the plans for Legion were going to start to constrict some of that, and they were going to start to take back over that stuff. And so I was like, okay, well, let's focus a little bit on that, get more out than we normally would to build a really great base, knowing that things are going to start to slow down as we get into our balance point.
Yeah.
And that Legion is going to take back a lot more of that manufacturing, right? Because like Legion it requires more support. There's 4 factions in it. It has these constant releases. As a big army game, you just have to produce more of it.
It needs more,
as
yeah,
well,
yeah.
because everyone's like they're getting multiple unit boxes potentially, so it has a higher volume, and all of that stuff factors into your logistics. So we were kind of trying to pay ahead, and then we knew we would get to this point, and so now you are correct in that. What we're seeing is the natural evolution of Shatterpoint kind of reaching its homeostasis in terms of like the amount of releases and the pacing and all that. And I think overall, well, if you're super into Shatterpoint, that can be a little bit of a letdown in that, oh, I'm not going to get as much new stuff.
Yeah.
The reality is that you're only playing with 2 squads, maybe 4 squads if you're in a premier event. So the amount of things that you need to continue to like explore, right, or the things that you can even use in a game is much different.
Yeah.
And so that slower pacing of releases can be kind of a benefit to allow players to be able to explore and really fully immerse themselves in their different squads that they put together, hobbying and that kind of stuff. And as we said, during the presentation, right, we have tons of plans that are beyond just the products for it.
Yeah.
We have Galactic Legends, we have all of the organized play that we're really stepping up for all 3 of the games, but Shatterpoint is a big one of that. We have the GTs, we have all this stuff. So it will feel maybe a bit jarring to go from like foot on the gas pedal full speed to like cruising speed.
Yeah. Yeah.
But overall, like it's the healthy spot for the game, and it was always part of the plan. And we tried our best to make sure that messaging was there, both for the Legion community that was like seeing a little bit of a dearth of releases, and for the Shatterpoint community that was being overspoiled with releases as well.
Yeah. No, I mean that totally makes sense, and it's something I haven't thought about. But you're totally right. Is that your average Legion player is, if they play one faction, they're still experiencing about 25% of the game, but your average Shatterpoint player is probably only experiencing like 10% of the game at any given time, even if they bought a few boxes. And so, I think I agree. It's an opportunity to maybe branch out a little bit, try a couple new strike forces, and that makes a lot of sense. I'll also say, as a Republic Shatterpoint player, when I do play, is that it was exciting to see Mace Windu's going up to 7 squad points.
Yeah. The rebalance, I think, will inject a lot of, at the same time, right? That rebalance is going to inject a lot of freshness into those things you already have.
Yeah.
Going back and taking a look like Mace Windu.
Or the 501st clones who I built and painted, and then ARC Troopers came out and put 501st away for a while.
Yeah. Well, I will say that like we talked about, 501st are definitely getting a little bit of blow up. ARC Troopers are getting a little bit of a tamp just to kind of like balance things out.
Okay.
And that's kind of going across a lot of the different things. So, but yeah, I'm really excited about the rebalance. We spent a decent chunk of development time and everything like going back over. It really covers the first 12 months ish of releases.
Yeah.
And
it's pretty quick for a rebalance, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be
which is
year
a good
2.
thing.
It'll be year 2, which is about, we always talk about how we like to let things breathe, right? We want to see how things are going, and especially with a brand new game.
Sure.
You don't really have a sense of how things are in the environment and the meta and everything else.
Yeah.
Until about that first year, and then you're like, okay, well, let's start to analyze, start to look at stuff, and then you want to bring it out. With good testing and everything, once you have a really good, solid foundation of where things are. And it's obviously not going to be the last one. I'm sure that we will wind up going back and looking at things as more and more of the new releases start to come out and affect things and all of that. But yeah, it was about on target. When we did the MCP first rebalance, we found that we really wanted to do about year 2. And so we kind of soft booked. We were like, Shatterpoint's going to come out in about year 2. We're going to do a big rebalance for the initial stuff, and it worked out to be about right.
It's almost like you guys have been through this a couple times before.
You start to learn things. we can be taught sometimes.
Fair. Real quick, I was also going to ask, like, connected to Mace, maybe this is strange, but the first question that I have when I saw Mace going up to 7 is, what about poor Pons?
What about poor Pons? Yeah, that's a good question. He did get a look. He's not increasing in points though. So
okay.
One of the kind of like, and this was something that we were willing to accept, right?
Yeah.
Is that that box will be a point under, just based on what the contents are in it.
Sure.
But we don't really think that affects like a player's ability to use it within the game if that's the one they picked up and they don't have anything else to plug into it. And overall, we were willing to kind of like make that choice to make the experience of Mace better, right? When you're faced with, well, you can keep it bad, but it works, or you can like make it better, but it has this little bit of a detriment in that you're playing a point down. We were like, yeah, just play a point down.
He still allows 7-point squads to run 4-point supports.
Oh, yeah.
So I mean, yeah, he still has a place. My heart goes out to Palms. Just wanted to mention that real fast. So it's scooting back to Legion a little bit. We've seen pretty much everything about the new Ahsoka Republic Commander. First of all, well, we'll get to the upgrade part of Ahsoka in a second, but when I've been talking about her with everybody else, is that we're looking at this card and there's this one thing that is sort of affecting our ability to pass judgment, or sort of like know what we're getting into, and that is this Shien mastery business. So I'm curious about, like, can you tell us anything about that right now?
No, I can tell you all about it on April 15th.
April 15th. Okay, well there you go. It's not just going to be a rules update. Is that, or I guess because the new rule book will come out, and then Shien Mastery will come out. Got it. Okay. Yep. Hey, that's all right. That's closer than you might think. That means that I have a whole other thing to prepare for. Okay, so regarding the fact that she's an upgrade, it seems like that creates space to do something similar. Correct me if I'm wrong, but she is the first character that normally has her own unit that also exists as an upgrade.
That is true.
Yeah. Do you think that that's space that you're going to expand into?
100%.
Yeah.
This is the whole idea, right? The whole concept behind it came from, and we've talked about this a lot on various places, but one of our big goals is that we know, Legion players want to see more of the iconic names, more of the characters on the table.
Right.
But the game is an army game, and it's based around units, and commanders and operatives are pretty expensive in points, and especially the iconic characters, the named ones like your Anakin Skywalkers and your Luke Skywalkers and all that stuff, your Darth Vaders. In order to be powerful on the table, they have to be a lot of points, which means that you have to kind of build around them. And so you can't really say, well, I'll just take 4 Darth Vader's worth of characters and have an army that's going to function, or that's even going to be legal at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we solve for that, right? Some of it was increasing the point size of the game. Some of it was, the work we've done with the command cards and things like that to open up the command hand to allow more character diversity within your list, because you don't feel like you have to take all 6 command cards to make a character fully functional. But the other side to it was, okay, well, if you just want to see the character on the table, what if we look to, the Fives, Echoes, Gideon Hass of the world, and we just started letting bigger characters exist as squad leaders.
Right.
It gets the character on the table. It feels cool. They can have some impact on the unit that they're with, and it also means that you can see multiple different names in an army that still works in a way that Legion's core is about, right? Which is unit to unit combat. It's about mass battle tactics. And so that was really, because originally we did, and we even announced this, right? We were like, you're going to get 2 versions of Ahsoka. You're going to get the commander and the operative, and that was our take. But as we went through the process and started talking about it, we're like, the operative really doesn't add anything that we can't get out of the commander with using the associate keyword.
Yeah.
And why not find a way to better implement characters into games? And so she became kind of the first, or the proof of concept of this idea of, you can be a full-on unit with all the rules and all the points and everything else, or you can be this unit upgrade that leads the squad, and then all of a sudden, like, this is a special squad.
Yeah.
It's Ahsoka squad. And that's cool from a hobbying standpoint and everything, because, like, I know a lot of people like to paint their clone troopers with the season 7, like, Ahsoka paint job and everything else, but also just from an army perspective, like, the more of these that come out, the more options you have to be like, all right, well, I want this unit to have more firepower, so maybe someday there's a Han Solo one, right? That lets Han Solo connect to a unit, and so you can put Han in there now. He's gunslinging with people or other things, and now we're kind of trying to, we're balancing the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
You're able to see your favorite characters, use more of them on the tabletop, but have them do so in a way that adds to the value and the basic foundation of the game. And so that was exciting. So Ahsoka was the first. She definitely won't be the last. We are definitely being kind of I want to say conscious about if a character makes sense to do that. I think there are some characters that do, and some characters that maybe necessarily
Darth
don't.
Vader, maybe not
Darth
so
Vader,
much.
yeah, Darth Vader being attached to units seems really weird and awkward. That's not something that would happen.
Yeah. The middle of the road, like level of characters is
I mean, or like characters that we see leading smaller teams and things like that.
Right.
And then of course, can we do something that's interesting and still feels like the character but is there? So more of that stuff's going to be coming. I think it's really cool expansion potential as well. Talking about some of like the future upgrade card packs. One of the really exciting things is that it's not very difficult to make a character upgrade for like an existing commander, and then have that be available, and then players instantly have access to it through just an upgrade card. And I think that's from a player perspective and everything else, that's very exciting. So
does that also fit into the concept of like a counterpart for a hero character, or are we more talking about squad leaders and heavies?
I mean, possibly, right? I think you could do it that way, but more specifically in terms of that, it's like going in as the squad leader, the heavy, the personnel slot, those kinds of things.
Right.
But I mean, it is certainly possible to say here's a counterpart unit card.
I was just like thinking of it, like a little cheaper Commander Cody that could hang out with Obi-Wan or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, so I think again, as we continue to explore the roads and see what's going on,
right,
and where the right balance is, right? Because we don't. I say the term hero hammer because I'm old, but it's definitely not a direction that we want the game to go. We want it to maintain its status as this really incredible army game.
Yeah.
But with the idea that Star Wars characters are super cool, and part of the reason that we're playing a Star Wars game is because we want to see those characters.
Yeah, makes sense. Speaking of that, something I noticed in the re-release schedule that caught my eye was that there is an expansion labeled Rook Kast.
Oh yeah. So not necessarily an expansion. That she is on the release schedule, and she's going to wind up in a reboxing with Shadow Collective Maul, Gar Saxon, and Rook Kast.
Okay.
So it's going to be like this combined pack. I think in just the way that they listed it in the thing, it's like they're just here, but she won't be by herself.
Okay, so she's still there as as like a heavy or a leader for Mandalorian Super Commandos. Okay, all good. So
that doesn't mean that
it couldn't change in the future, right? Like we were just talking about. Yeah. So I'm gonna be a little bit selfish here, so I apologize. I apologize to everybody else, but I will say that I've been playing with Wookiee Defenders all weekend. And it's always a joy to play Wookiees, especially the Fluttercrafts. My favorite unit in the game. I got to play a game on stream, and I luckily didn't make a ton of mistakes right in front of the whole world. But I was curious about whether there was anything that you like, even if it's general thoughts that you could share about the expansion of them as a Battleforce, because they're a little bit different. Sure. Given that they're not usually ones to hire mercenaries, as far as I'm familiar with. I'm not like that deep into Wookiee politics to really know how they like to spend their money. But I was just curious if there's anything that you wanted to sort of wax about with that.
I mean, I think there's still stuff that we could do, right? The Star Corps is the group, is the clone battalion that's on Kashyyyk at the time, and you got Gree as the commander. So right there, I mean, there's like potential for those units to be there. And I mean, we have two types of Wookiees, but I'm sure there's more flavors of Wookiees that could be there.
Yeah.
One of the things that might be neat, we talked about how these customizable options are like just the first, but I mean, looking at like a customizable bounty hunter, customizable like Wookiee warrior or like Wookiee chieftain or something. So I think the potential is like always there, right?
Yeah.
How soon will we see some of that stuff or not?
Oh yeah, I
difficult
get
to
it.
say.
I get it.
But I mean, I wouldn't discount the fact that there's probably going to be things that definitely fit within that Battleforce and even that scene from Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah.
That are on the board for like Legion inclusion at some point.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, sounds like you guys are thinking about it. That's really all I like to hear. I was also gonna go back and quickly ask about when I saw the agent part of the new customizable pack. Is that the Imperial one actually looks like it came straight out of Battlefront 2, and I was actually curious about how much of Legion has come from that game in particular, because it seems like quite a bit did. Are there any fans of the AMG office?
We've got a couple folks who play quite a bit. I mean, Simone Elliott, our head of studio, is a super fan of that game because they wound up using the Imperial Raider design that she was a part of creating whole cloth.
Yeah, and
with LFL.
Those of us who have been X-Wing and Armada fans were like, "Hey, I know that thing." Yeah, that's right.
So she has a really big soft spot for that game.
Yeah.
We do sometimes utilize their reference for things like the ISB agent helmets and stuff. Although those are drawn as well from like Callus and other things.
Yeah.
But yeah, every once in a while, like there are just certain things that we know exist in Star Wars, but the reference doesn't exist in the normal LFL archives. And so at that point, a lot of the times, funny enough, it winds up being in Battlefront. And so we do we grab certain inspiration or certain reference from it, and we'll bring it back to LFL and be like, "How about this?" And they're like, "That looks fine."
I think you say like you were cool with it for Battlefront 2, so you'd be cool with it for us.
There's a lot of player mods for Battlefront 2, so it is one of those ones where you got to be very careful and you really have to fact check your sources.
That's fair.
Once or twice we've been like, "What about this?" And they're like, "That's not real." And we're like, "What is Battlefront 2?" They're like, "No, it's not." And we look at it and we're like, "Oh, you're right. Oops."
Very tricky.
So you got to check your sources really carefully.
Yeah,
when you're doing
makes sense.
Stuff.
Makes sense.
But it has been a touch point once or twice for things. Just to get designs or to get inspiration from, and things like that. So there's definitely a couple elements with that ISB style of armor and agent, the Imperial agent, that customizable thing that we did use a bit of that for. So
cool.
It's a good eye.
Cool. So I know we got to let you go in just a second, but I was just gonna ask you, we're actually gonna have you back. We're very spoiled.
Yeah.
In mid-April.
You're gonna get me and up, Pagani. You're gonna get two Wills again.
Oh boy. We'll roll out the red carpet and hopefully there won't be any more thunderstorms going on.
April.
The next
Who knows?
day, yeah.
April showers.
Shoot. But I was just curious: is there anything in particular that you think is going to be the most popular part of the rules change?
Ooh. Well, I mean,
you don't have to be specific. I'm just asking about a corner of it,
The most. I was going to say the most hotly debated part of it was kind of revealed a little bit with the new demo cards and stuff, because they're using all the contents of the new
right.
Starter sets, which is that at is changing to within. And within does not mean completely within. It means just any portion of the miniature's base is within the measurement.
And so
there's a pretty big language cleanup that's happening in order to clarify and codify a lot of the wording that just hopefully makes the game easier and more accessible, and a little bit more like English and a little less like rules technical. Where you're like, that means this, but it doesn't, because it actually means this.
And actually, about that is that Izzy Gambliel, a friend of mine, a local, is that he was actually thinking that the change may have been to make the language, the translation of it a little bit easier, because the word "at" can be very flexible between languages, whereas "within" is more specific.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that too. Sometimes we do try to, not always, but sometimes when we can, if it's like, oh, there's not really a good word for this, we'll try to adjust. Sometimes that's not possible because because of the language barrier. But that is another one that is, yeah, it was part of it. It's part of why within language was used initially in some of our earlier rule sets.
Okay.
So codifying it through that. It also just provides, like devs do have each creative dev team kind of has its own way of describing like certain core mechanics and rules, and codifying those means that it can create a lot less confusion among the entire studio, because when people are proofing stuff or they're like peer reviewing stuff, they're like, wait, what does that mean? Is that right? Should this be capped? Should this be not? So style guides, like simplification, is also a really good thing as well.
Yeah. And so for something like Infiltrate, where it does need to be fully within like a territory in terms of like where the unit goes, like is that how it's going to be phrased? Is that it'll be fully within?
I'm not sure what the final language on that one is specifically, but we obviously have things that are like completely within language in the other games as well, so it'll just follow those formats.
Okay.
So if you're familiar with like how completely within is done in those games, it'll be the same.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, well, we'll let you go. We're gonna have you back in just a few weeks, but really appreciate it, Will.
No, absolutely. Thanks for
Hope you enjoy the rest of the con.
You too, sir.
All right, take care, everybody.